Kim Porter was found dead in her bed. Toluca Lake, California, November 15, 2018. The woman who spent 13 years loving Sean Diddy Combs lay perfectly still. No struggle, no sound, just the kind of silence expensive homes are built to hide. Hours later, they would call it pneumonia. Her friends would call it impossible, and the man she'd loved would call her his soulmate. The house was immaculate. Kim's home always was. Old Hollywood elegance in a new money neighborhood. Every surface perfect, every corner composed. She lay in her bedroom, 47 years old, her face peaceful against white pillows as if she'd simply fallen asleep and decided not to wake up. Someone came to check on her that morning, found her cold. Called 911. The paramedics arrived to a scene that looked like rest, but was actually death. The kind that happens without warning, without witnesses, without explanation that makes sense. No signs of struggle, no indication of distress. Just a woman who'd been healthy days before, posting on Instagram, making plans, living the quiet, elegant life she'd built after 13 years in the hurricane of Sean Combs's world, now gone. Dead from pneumonia, they'd eventually say, lobar pneumonia, a lung infection that overwhelmed her system before anyone knew she was sick. Tragic but medical, explainable, the kind of death that happens to people sometimes, even healthy people, even people who weren't supposed to die young. Except Kim's friends knew something the official reports wouldn't mention. She'd been fine, active, working out. No indication of illness severe enough to kill. And she'd said something in the months before her death, something that would haunt everyone who heard it. If something happens to me, don't believe it was an accident. A woman doesn't say that unless she's afraid. Unless she knows something. Unless she's writing a memoir about 13 years with one of the most powerful men in music and understands that some truths are dangerous to speak. The memoir. Everyone close to Kim knew about it. She'd been working on it for years. Writing about her relationship with Sean, about bad boy records, about things she'd witnessed and stayed silent about because silence was the price of proximity to power, because speaking meant being the bitter ex instead of the dignified one, because her children needed their father and exposing him meant destroying their family. But she was finally ready, nearly finished, talking to friends about publishing, about telling her truth after years of letting his truth be the only one that mattered. And then she died, suddenly, mysteriously, and the memoir disappeared, never published, never found. Its contents known only to Kim and possibly to whoever made sure the world would never read it. I don't need the spotlight, I am the light. The news spread through Los Angeles like wildfire through dry hills. Kim Porter dead at 47. Diddy's longtime partner, mother of his children. The woman who'd been the grace behind his chaos, the silence behind his empire, the dignity behind his drama for 13 years. The funeral would be massive. Celebrities in black, cameras capturing grief, Sean sobbing at the pulpit calling her his soulmate while the world watched and calculated what that word meant coming from a man whose love had always been complicated by infidelity, control, and the kind of possession that looked like devotion but felt like ownership. But before the funeral, before the conspiracy theories and the tributes and the questions that would echo for years, there was just this. A beautiful black woman lying dead in an expensive house in Toluca Lake, her silence finally complete, her story unfinished in ways that would make people ask forever. Was this really pneumonia? Or was it the inevitable conclusion of loving a man whose empire was built on things that couldn't survive exposure? What if Kim didn't die from illness but from knowing too much, staying too long, and finally trying to speak? Because Kim Porter didn't die young by old Hollywood standards. She died at 47. But she died quietly, conveniently, right when she was about to publish the one thing that could damage the man who'd defined her life. And everything that happened after. Every tear, every tribute, every claim of eternal love, All of it felt like performance from people who'd spent years treating Kim as supporting character in someone else's story. Was this accident or epilogue? Medical tragedy or convenient timing? The death of a woman or the silencing of a witness? The questions matter because Kim Porter's story isn't just about one woman loving one powerful man. It's about every woman who learns that loyalty to powerful men is a currency, and silence is the price, and sometimes the cost of speaking is your life. She wasn't born to be anyone's shadow. She was born Kimberly Porter on December 15, 1970 in Columbus, Georgia, a small southern city where ambition meant leaving, where beauty was currency, where a girl with Kim's face and composure was always going to end up somewhere bigger than where she started. Her mother raised her with old-school black Southern values, dignity above everything, composure as armor, grace as power. Kim learned early that elegance wasn't weakness, it was strategy. That silence could be strength. That the most dangerous women weren't the loudest, but the ones who knew when to speak and when to watch. Columbus taught Kim other lessons too. That beautiful black girls were noticed but not necessarily valued. That doors opened for beauty but often led to rooms where you were expected to be decoration, not decision-maker. That the world would take your face and your body and your grace and use them to build empires you'd never own. Kim's mother tried to prepare her, warned her that beauty was power but also trap, that men would want to possess her but not necessarily love her, that she needed to be smart and strategic because the world wasn't kind to black women, even beautiful ones, maybe especially beautiful ones. She began as a face in other people's videos and ended as the silence behind a king's empire. By 16, she was modeling. Local work in Georgia, then Atlanta, then New York. The trajectory every beautiful girl from a small town follows when beauty is the only resource anyone acknowledges. She signed with Revlon, worked for Pepsi, walked for Tommy Hilfiger. The work was good, the money was good, but Kim was always aware she was temporary, replaceable, valuable only as long as she was young and beautiful and willing to be whatever the camera needed her to be. She appeared in music videos for the notorious B.I.G., for Usher, for artists whose names everyone knew while the models remained nameless, beautiful ornaments to male success. The 90s were the golden age of the video model, gorgeous women dancing behind rappers, existing as decoration, paid to be seen but never heard. Valuable only as long as they were young and beautiful and willing to be background to someone else's story. Kim was good at it, professional, reliable, and slowly, quietly, she was learning the rules of an industry that would define the rest of her life. Be beautiful, be available, be silent, and maybe if you're lucky and strategic, you can leverage that into something more permanent. Kim was 21 when she had her first child. Quincy, with Al B. Sure, an R&B singer who was briefly famous and permanently unfaithful. The relationship didn't last. Kim was a single mother at 21, still modeling, still appearing in videos, still beautiful but now with a child to support and a career that valued youth and freedom above motherhood and responsibility. She moved to Los Angeles, kept working, raised her son, and understood that she needed something more stable than modeling gigs and video appearances, something that would provide security for her and Quincy, something that looked like power even if it was really just proximity to it. And in 1994, at a party everyone who mattered attended, she met Sean Combs. He was 25, not yet Diddy, not quite Puff Daddy, but already building bad boy records into an empire. He had Biggie, had Faith Evans, had the hustle and charisma that made people want proximity even when proximity was dangerous. Kim was 24. Beautiful, elegant, composed in ways that balanced Sean's chaos. The connection was immediate. She had the grace he needed to soften his edges. He had the power and success she wanted for herself and her son. They started dating. The pattern that would define 13 years established itself immediately. Sean would be unfaithful. Kim would leave. Sean would apologize and promise change. Kim would return. Each cycle taught Kim something about the rules of this relationship. That Sean's infidelity was constant. That his apologies were sincere in the moment but meaningless long-term. That he loved her in his way, but his way included other women, always other women. A rotation of models and singers and groupies who got his attention but never his children, never his home, never the stability Kim had. They loved the idea of me, not the work it takes to love me. But here's what the simple narrative misses. Kim didn't just stay because she was weak or blinded by love. She strategized her silence, believing control was safety. She thought if she was perfect enough, beautiful enough, loyal enough, graceful enough, dignified enough through his disrespect, Sean would eventually choose her completely. She thought her silence about his infidelities was investment, that her composure through public humiliation was building equity. She didn't just stay. She calculated that staying, enduring, being the dignified one while other women were temporary would eventually make her irreplaceable. It didn't work. But it wasn't because Kim lacked strategy. It was because the game was rigged from the start. Sean didn't want a wife. He wanted a queen who would stay in her lane, a woman who would give him stability and children and the appearance of family while he maintained his freedom. Kim was perfect for that role. Too perfect, which meant she was trapped in it. In 1998, she gave birth to their son Christian. In 2006, to twin daughters Delilah and Jessie. 3 children binding her to a man who called her his queen while treating her like property he owned but didn't need to cherish. The relationship was on and off for 13 years. Publicly, they'd break up. Privately, they'd remain entangled. Emotionally, they never fully separated because Kim had built her entire adult life around Sean and their children, and walking away completely meant dismantling everything she'd constructed. Bad Boy Records exploded during those years. Sean became Puff Daddy, then P. Diddy, then just Diddy. Each name change marking new success, new money, new power. He was everywhere: music, fashion, television, vodka, building a brand that made him one of the most powerful men in entertainment. The money was enormous. The influence was enormous. And Kim was there beside him, not as his wife. He never married her, never gave her that security or status, but as his partner, the mother of his children, the woman who managed his household and raised his kids and maintained the image of family while he maintained his freedom. She appeared at his events looking immaculate, old Hollywood grace in a hip-hop world. While other women in the industry were loud and flashy, Kim was refined and composed. Photographers loved her because she gave them elegance. The culture respected her because she never spoke publicly about Sean's infidelities, never played the bitter baby mama, never used her proximity to power for attention. She stayed dignified, stayed silent, stayed loyal to a man whose loyalty was always conditional. Kim saw things during those 13 years. Witnessed behavior at bad boy parties that made her uncomfortable. Heard conversations about business practices that were illegal or unethical. Knew about relationships Sean had with much younger women, some barely legal. Understood that the empire he was building had foundations that wouldn't survive scrutiny. But she stayed silent because that was her role. To know everything and say nothing. To see everything and remember it but never speak it. To be the woman who could be trusted with secrets because she'd proven over and over that she valued loyalty more than truth. But what does dignity cost when it requires swallowing knowledge of things that should be exposed? What does composure demand when it means protecting a man who uses that protection to continue hurting people? Kim learned to carry the weight of what she knew. Learned to smile at industry events while knowing the man beside her was sleeping with multiple women. Learned to raise their children in stability while their father built his empire on instability. Learned to be the grace in a world of chaos while the chaos was created by the man she loved. Friends described her as unshakable. But behind the composed exterior, Kim was making the calculations women married to power always make. Stay and have security but sacrifice dignity. Leave and have freedom but lose the family structure you've built. Choose yourself or choose your children. Fight for respect from a man who's shown you repeatedly he won't give it, or accept whatever version of love he's willing to offer and call it enough. Loyalty is a dangerous gift. It keeps you where you don't belong. The relationship finally ended in 2007. 13 years after it started, 3 children later. After countless infidelities Kim stayed silent about, after she'd given Sean her 20s and 30s, after she'd built her entire identity around being the woman behind his empire. They announced the separation. She moved out, bought her own house, tried to build a life that wasn't defined entirely by Sean Combs and bad boy records and the role she'd played for over a decade, but they never fully separated. Sean was still father to their children, still financially supportive because he was wealthy beyond measure and supporting Kim and the kids was easy. Still present in Kim's life in ways that made moving on impossible. She couldn't date seriously because any man who approached her had to compete with Sean's shadow. Couldn't speak publicly about their relationship because that would hurt their children. Couldn't fully separate emotionally because 13 years of entanglement doesn't untangle easily, especially when you share 3 children and the man still calls you regularly, still shows up at your house, still treats you like you belong to him even after you've left. She tried to build something separate from him. Acted occasionally. Small roles in shows like Single Ladies and Wicked Wicked Games, nothing major but enough to prove she had talent beyond beauty. Produced content. Focused on her children. Dated other men, though nobody serious, nobody who could compete with the space Sean still occupied. She posted on Instagram pictures of her kids, quotes about peace and self-love, content that looked like healing but might have been performance of healing for someone too dignified to show the world her pain. People who knew her in those final years said she seemed lighter, happier. Like she'd finally found peace outside Sean's orbit. She practiced yoga, focused on spirituality, talked about wanting simplicity, about cherishing family, about gratitude for peace after years of chaos. She seemed healthy, active. There was no indication anything was wrong, except in private, to friends she trusted completely. Kim was writing. Had been for years. A memoir about her 13 years with Sean, about bad boy records, about parties where she'd seen things that made her uncomfortable, about women who'd been much too young, about business practices that crossed lines, about the cost of being the woman who knew everything and said nothing. The manuscript was nearly finished. She talked about publishing it, about finally telling her side of a story that had always been told through Sean's perspective. The memoir became her coffin, the pages buried before the body. Kim knew the memoir was dangerous, told friends she was scared, said that speaking about certain things could have consequences. But she was tired of carrying secrets that protected a man who'd never protected her. Tired of being silent while Sean continued building an empire on her dignity. Tired of being the graceful ex who never spoke publicly while he took credit for their family, for her composure, for the stability she'd provided while he created chaos. Sometimes you love someone enough to let them destroy you because you believe they'll stop. In the months before her death, Kim's social media took on a different tone. Still elegant, still composed, but tinged with something that felt like warning. She posted, "Cherish your friends and your family while you can." Posted photos of her children with captions about love being the only thing that matters. Posted quotes about peace and letting go and living authentically. And to friends, she said things that were more explicit. "I'm almost finished with the book. There are things people need to know. I'm tired of protecting people who never protected me. And most chilling, if something happens to me, don't believe it was an accident." What did Kim know that made her say that? What was in the memoir that made her fear for her safety? What had she witnessed during 13 years with one of the most powerful men in music that she was finally ready to expose? I wasn't scared, I was tired. Maybe that's the truth Kim would have told if she'd lived long enough. That she wasn't running from Sean or Bad Boy or the consequences of speaking because she was too exhausted to run. Too tired from 13 years of performing grace under impossible conditions. Too worn down from being beautiful and loyal and silent while the man she loved built an empire partially on her dignity, partially on behavior she'd stayed quiet about for years. Maybe she stayed in Los Angeles, stayed accessible, stayed in Sean's orbit even while planning to publish the memoir because leaving required energy she no longer had. Or maybe she stayed because she believed the book would protect her. That once the manuscript was with publishers, once other people knew what she knew, she'd be safe because harming her would only prove the truth she was telling. Maybe Kim calculated that speaking was safer than continued silence. Maybe she was wrong. November 15th, 2018. Kim went to bed feeling slightly ill. She'd had what seemed like a cold for a few days, nothing serious. She'd rested, taken over-the-counter medication, told people she'd be fine, that it was just a bug, that she'd feel better soon. By morning, she was dead. The cause took weeks to determine. The medical examiner's office was cautious, thorough. Finally, they announced lobar pneumonia, a bacterial infection in her lungs that had overwhelmed her system. Tragic but natural. Medical but rare in someone so young and healthy. No signs of foul play. No indication of anything sinister. Just a woman who got sick and died before anyone realized how sick she was, before the infection could be treated, before pneumonia that usually responds to antibiotics killed her. But the timeline didn't make sense to people who knew Kim. She'd been active days before, working out, posting on Instagram, making plans. Then she felt sick. Then she was dead. Pneumonia can kill quickly, but usually not that quickly in healthy 47-year-olds. Usually there are warning signs. Usually there's time to seek treatment. Usually it doesn't look like someone going to bed with a cold and dying in their sleep. And the memoir. Kim had been working on it for years, was nearly finished, had been talking about publishing. After her death, it disappeared. Never found. Not on her computer, not in her house. Not with any publisher or agent. Just gone. The manuscript that was supposed to tell truths about 13 years with Sean Combs vanished as completely as Kim herself. The conspiracy theories started immediately, spreading through social media faster than the official story. Sean had her killed, or had her silenced, or knew she was dying and didn't help. Or the memoir contained things so damaging that its disappearance and Kim's death happening simultaneously couldn't be coincidence. The theories ranged from plausible to absurd, but they all circled the same truth. Kim's death was too convenient, too sudden, too perfectly timed to silence a woman who'd been about to speak. The funeral was held at Cascade Hills Church in Columbus, Georgia. Back home, back where she started before Los Angeles and Bad Boy and Sean. It was massive. Over 200 people attended. Mary J. Blige sang No More Drama. Faith Evans performed. Every important person in hip-hop and R&B came. Jay-Z and Beyoncé, Pharrell, Usher, Busta Rhymes. The funeral was 3 hours long, a spectacle of grief beautifully staged, and Sean sobbed, fell completely apart at the pulpit, could barely speak. Called Kim his soulmate, his best friend, the mother of his children, the love of his life. Said he'd failed her. Said he wished he'd done better. Said she was the one. The grief looked real, probably was real, but sincerity doesn't answer questions about how a healthy woman dies suddenly from pneumonia. Doesn't explain where the memoir went. Doesn't resurrect the dead or give them back their voices. Her children placed a family photo on her casket. When light reflected through the glass, Kim's face appeared in the image like she was still there, still present, still watching over them. It was the kind of moment that felt supernatural. Kim refusing to fully disappear even in death. I never wanted to be a headline. I wanted to be a home. But Kim became a headline. Her death was news for weeks. The conspiracy theories were news. Sean's grief was news. Everything about Kim's death became content, became conversation, became another chapter in Sean Combs's story instead of the final chapter in Kim Porter's. The official cause of death remained pneumonia. The police investigation found no evidence of foul play. The medical examiner stood by the conclusion. The case was closed. Kim was buried beside her mother in Columbus. And the world moved on because the world always moves on, even from deaths that don't make sense, even from women who die with secrets. But something did happen, and everyone decided to believe it was an accident. Kim's death left a ghost in the culture, a question that wouldn't resolve, a sense that something wasn't right, couldn't be right, but also couldn't be proven wrong. Because Kim Porter wasn't the first woman to die mysteriously in proximity to male power. Wasn't the first to write a tell-all that never got published. Wasn't the first to stay loyal to a man who didn't deserve it and pay with her life. But she might have been the first to die in the Instagram age, where her silence could be documented in real time, where every post could be analyzed for clues, where her elegance could be photographed and turned into content even as it was killing her. She might have been the first whose death sparked conspiracy theories that spread virally, that got investigated by amateur detectives on social media, that became a story not just about one woman but about all the women who love powerful men and learn too late that proximity to power is its own kind of danger. In the years after Kim's death, more stories emerged about Sean, about violence toward women, about Cassie Ventura, his girlfriend after Kim, filing a lawsuit in 2023 alleging years of abuse, rape, sex trafficking, about other women coming forward with similar stories, about federal raids on his properties in 2024, about an empire that looked like success but was allegedly built partially on exploitation, control, violence. The allegations didn't prove anything about Kim's death, couldn't prove anything because Kim was gone and couldn't speak. But they painted a picture of a man Kim had known for 13 years, had loved, had stayed silent about, had finally tried to speak about in a memoir that disappeared when she died. What did Kim see during those 13 years that she put in the manuscript nobody would ever read? What did she witness at bad boy parties? What did she know about Sean's relationships with young women? What business practices had she learned about? What violence had she experienced or observed? The questions hang in the air like ghosts because Kim can't answer them and the memoir that might have answered them is gone. Her friends say she seemed scared in the final months. Say she was careful about what she said and to whom. Say she was trying to protect her children while also trying to tell her truth. Caught between motherhood and self-preservation. Between loyalty to the father of her children and loyalty to the woman she'd been before she met him. Between silence that kept her safe and speech that might get her killed. I learned that loving someone doesn't mean losing yourself. But Kim did lose herself. Spent 13 years being defined by her relationship to Sean. Became famous not for her work but for who she loved. Became important not for what she achieved but for whose children she bore. Became a story not about Kim Porter but about Sean Combs's partner, ex-baby mama. Always defined by him, never fully separate, never her own complete story. And when she tried to separate, when she started writing about their relationship, about what she'd witnessed and survived and stayed silent about, she died. Maybe from pneumonia, maybe from exhaustion that weakened her immune system, maybe from stress that made her body vulnerable to infection, maybe from something darker that pneumonia was convenient cover for. The truth died with Kim, and the only person who could confirm it never would. Naomi Campbell spoke at the funeral. Called Kim one of the strongest, most elegant women she'd ever known. Mary J. Blige said Kim was grace personified, a woman who could walk through fire and come out looking composed. Clive Davis said she was a combination of Grace Kelly and Coretta Scott King. Elegance and strength, beauty and endurance. The kind of woman who made dignity look effortless even when it cost everything. Everyone praised her composure, her grace, her ability to remain dignified through circumstances that would have destroyed other women. But what if that dignity was killing her? What if the composure was survival mechanism that became cage? What if the grace was armor Kim wore so long it fused to her skin, beautiful and suffocating? What if everything everyone praised about Kim Porter was actually evidence of what destroyed her? The ability to stay silent, to stay composed, to stay loyal even when loyalty was lethal? Her children inherited her beauty and her training in how to suffer elegantly. Quincy became an actor and model. Christian followed his father into music. The twins grew up gorgeous and poised, little versions of their mother walking through a world that would want to consume them the same way it consumed Kim. At the funeral, they were composed, dignified, holding themselves together the way Kim had taught them by example. You can be breaking inside, but outside you remain perfect, controlled, beautifully silent about pain. The light that chose silence. That's what Kim was. A light that could have illuminated so much about the industry, about bad boy, about the cost of loving powerful men, about the truths women hold that get them killed when they threaten to speak. But she chose silence for 13 years, then chose to break it and died trying. Or maybe she didn't choose. Maybe silence was chosen for her. Maybe she tried to speak. The memoir proves she tried, and the silence was imposed. Maybe Kim's death is exactly what it looks like. Convenient, mysterious, perfectly timed to stop a woman from telling truths that powerful men needed buried. Her Instagram remains active, a memorial now. Fans post tributes every anniversary of her death. Conspiracy theorists dissect her final posts looking for clues, analyzing every word, every photo, every caption for evidence of what killed her. Her children post photos remembering her, Kim laughing, Kim with them as babies, Kim looking elegant at events. Sean posts too, long captions about loving Kim, about her being his soulmate, about wishing he'd done better, about missing her every day. The posts feel sincere. They probably are, but sincerity doesn't resurrect the dead, doesn't answer questions about pneumonia that kills too quickly, doesn't explain where the memoir went, doesn't give Kim her voice back or let her tell the story she spent years writing and died before publishing. The culture asks questions in group chats and Reddit threads and YouTube conspiracy videos. What really happened to Kim Porter? Was it pneumonia or murder disguised as medical tragedy? What was in the memoir? What did Kim know? Who benefited from her silence? And if she really died from pneumonia, how convenient was it that she got sick and died right when she was about to publish the one thing that could damage the empire she'd spent 13 years supporting? We'll never know. The medical examiner said pneumonia. The police found no foul play. The case is closed. Kim is buried in Columbus beside her mother. The memoir is gone. And Sean continues being Diddy, continues being powerful, continues building empire on music and fashion and vodka and the loyalty of people who know what happens to those who aren't loyal. Kim Porter's legacy is complicated. She was beautiful, dignified, a devoted mother who raised 4 children with grace. She stayed composed through circumstances that would have broken other women. But she also stayed with a man who repeatedly betrayed her. She chose loyalty to someone who allegedly didn't deserve it. She remained silent about things that maybe shouldn't have stayed silent. And she died before she could tell her full story. Died with secrets that might have explained everything or nothing, died in a way that looked innocent but felt calculated. died at exactly the moment when her silence was about to break. What hidden truths are buried with women who love powerful men and die before they can speak? How many memoirs disappear before publication? How many women stay silent until they try to speak, then die conveniently, mysteriously, in ways that close investigations before they open? How many times can powerful men's partners die suspiciously before we stop calling it coincidence and start calling it pattern? Kim Porter proved you could be graceful and strong and still not survive. Proved that dignity isn't armor against systems built to silence women. Proved that loving a powerful man means accepting you'll never be more important than his empire, his secrets, his need for your silence. She proved that grace can be both power and prison, that composure can be survival and suicide, that loyalty is dangerous when given to people whose power depends on your silence. They wanted her beautiful, loyal, and quiet. She gave them beautiful and loyal. When she stopped being quiet, she died, maybe from pneumonia, maybe from exhaustion, maybe from knowing too much. The truth died with Kim Porter in Toluca Lake on November 15, 2018, and everyone who claimed to love her made sure it stayed dead. I don't need the spotlight, I am the light. But lights go out. Especially lights that illuminate things powerful people prefer remain in darkness. Especially lights held by women who threaten to expose what's underneath the success and glamour. Especially lights that burn too close to empire, that see too much, that remember everything and finally decide to speak. Kim Porter's light went out at 47. The cause was pneumonia. The timing was convenient. The memoir disappeared. The case was closed. And somewhere, in a drawer or hard drive or safety deposit box or nowhere at all because maybe it was destroyed the night she died, there's a manuscript about 13 years with Sean Combs, about truths Kim witnessed and costs she paid and the woman she became in service of love that looked like devotion but might have been destruction. The world will never read it. Kim's children will grow up without their mother. Sean will continue being Diddy until his own reckoning comes. Bad Boy will continue making money until the federal government decides it won't. And the culture will continue producing powerful men and the women who love them, who stay loyal to them, who stay silent for them, who sometimes die for them in ways that look like tragedy but feel like murder. The slow kind or the fast kind, pneumonia or sacrifice, accident or convenient ending. Kim Porter's ghost haunts hip-hop now. Not loudly, she was never loud, but persistently. A reminder that elegance doesn't protect you, that dignity doesn't save you, that being chosen by powerful men isn't winning. It's losing everything, including yourself. That loyalty is dangerous when it keeps you where you don't belong, and sometimes where you don't belong is where you die. She wasn't born to be anyone's shadow, but she became one. Spent 13 years being the light behind someone else's success, the grace behind chaos, the silence behind empire. And when she tried to step into her own light, when she tried to speak her own truth, write her own story, tell the world what she'd seen and survived, the light went out. November 15, 2018. A woman died in Toluca Lake. The world called it tragedy. Her friends called it suspicious. Her children called it unbearable. The medical examiner called it pneumonia. And somewhere in the space between those truths, Kim Porter, beautiful, dignified, loyal, tired, and finally fatally ready to speak, joined the long list of women who loved powerful men and didn't survive the loving. Does every woman who loves a powerful man have to die for his secrets? Or is silence just another way they teach us to disappear? The spotlight never wanted her. But she was the light anyway. And when that light threatened to illuminate ugly truths about empires built on exploitation, about parties where women were too young, about business practices that crossed lines, about violence disguised as love, when that light threatened to show what was really underneath the success, it went dark, permanently, conveniently, mysteriously, in ways that looked like accident but felt like ending. the kind written by powerful men who need silence to survive, executed by systems built to protect empire over truth, performed in expensive houses where beautiful women die quietly and everyone calls it pneumonia and moves on. Kim Porter is gone. The memoir is gone. The truth is gone. Only the questions remain, hanging in the air like ghosts, like warnings, like the light Kim was before someone or something decided that light was too dangerous to let keep burning.